In the vast tapestry of ancient Greek literature, the name Homer resonates deeply as our earliest Greek poet. But the world often overlooks the presence of another significant figure. Pherecydes of Syros holds the distinction of being our earliest extant writer of allegorical commentary on Homer. Pherecydes believed that Homer's poems held veiled truths concealed within their verses. One particular passage, known as the Colossus of Hera, caused quite a stir among ancient critics. At the opening of Book 15 of the Iliad, Zeus awakens and realizes that he has been deceived by his wife Hera. Zeus menaces Hera and asks her to remember when he punished her by binding her with an unbreakable chain and hanging anvils from her feet. This passage troubled ancient critics. Xenodotus, the renowned scholar of antiquity and head of the Library of Alexandria, even went so far as to expunge it from the records altogether. But later, another enigmatic commentator whose scribbled markings are on the margins of our manuscripts ventured an interpretation. Citing Pherecydes, he proceeded to offer an allegorical explanation. And actually, the history of the interpretation of the Colossus passage in the Iliad is a pretty good example of how complicated getting to the bottom of these questions can actually be. Pherecydes' books on allegory and philosophy don't survive to the modern day. They're fragmentary. The only way to access his writings is through compendia of his fragments, snippets of his books which have survived through quotations from other later authors. We know about Pherecydes' writings because of marginal scholia. The term scholia is commonly used in modern scholarship for the explanatory notes written or scribbled in the margins and between the lines of ancient texts. The bulk of the extant scholia are preserved in medieval manuscripts, though some come from the sands of Egypt from papyri. The most important scholia are the A scholia. They're named A after the famous 10th century CE manuscript of Venetus A that transmits them. They mention the name of Pherecydes at our text, at Book 15, line 18 of the Iliad, and so the passage is included in a compendium of philosophical fragments. The most famous collection of these fragments of philosophical writers is Diel's Krantz, abbreviated DK. The numbering of that book, Die Fragmente der Vorsokratiker, the Fragments of the Pre-Socratics, is a standard system for referencing the works of the ancient Greek pre-Socratic philosophers. The book was first published in 1903 and later revised and expanded 3 times by Diels. It was finally revised in a 5th edition in 1934 by Walter Krantz. If you want to use the book, you should always find and cite the edition revised by Krantz, the 1934 5th edition. The Loeb edition of Most and Lax is the most recent collection of these fragments, and crucially is an English-facing translation, which is quite nice. This is the easiest place to go for the texts of the ancient Greek philosophers which haven't survived to the present day. Anyway, Pherecydes' interpretation is very strange. Zeus is the aether, or fiery upper air. Hera is the middle air. The 2 anvils used to weigh down Hera's limbs are earth and water, respectively, and the golden chain brings moisture down from the air and binds the changing elements together. The whole symbolizes the stability of the universe. The Neoplatonist Porphyry gives much the same explanation, but interprets the chain as the heavenly fire. This tale reflected not just the surface meaning of the words, but a different, hidden meaning. It symbolized the intricate structure of the cosmos itself. While the term allegoria would not emerge until the Roman period, this practice of allegorical reading dates back to ancient times, as old as any form of interpretation of Homer. The allegorical approach to the Iliad found its earliest attestation in the works of Theagenes of Rhegium, a 6th century BCE scholar who allegorized the battle of the gods in Book 21 of the Iliad as a conflict of the elements, such as heat versus cold. Strikingly, scenes depicting conflicts between the gods and the Titans or the castration of Uranus by Kronos stirred the ire of ancient moralists such as Heraclitus, Xenophanes, and Plato. Plato, though aware of the allegorical interpretation of the castration story, found it inadequate for social control because he said the young could not actually comprehend allegory. They merely remembered the story. Instances of adultery among the gods also demanded alternative explanations. The love affair between Aphrodite and Ares, for example, could be interpreted as an allegory representing cosmic forces, symbolizing love and strife. Take Xenophon's portrayal of Socrates, who noted that Odysseus alone escaped the fate of being transformed into a pig by Circe, and linked the entire episode to excessive indulgence in food and drink. The allegorical interpretation presents Circe as the embodiment of insatiable appetite and lust, an enticement that lures and ensnares. And likewise, other trials faced by Odysseus in the Odyssey underwent similar analyses, as allegorists delved into the underlying meanings and symbolic implications of the poem. Passages that appeared unusual, elaborate, or surpassed the needs of the plot attracted allegorical scrutiny. The shield of Achilles in Iliad 18 and the depiction of the nymphs' cave in Odyssey 13 with their grandeur and intricacy beckoned to be deciphered. During the classical period, these allegorical readings of Homer were referred to as enigmata, enigmas, huponoiai, underlying meanings, or symbola, symbols. Allegory was not limited to a specific technique, but rather embodied a comprehensive approach to the text. The allegorists believed that Homer's epics, especially his masterpieces, bore profound implications concealed beneath their apparent narratives. Unveiling these subterranean codes became the audience's primary task, a quest requiring astute attention and ingenious interpretation. This approach sets itself apart from, for example, Aristotle's method in the Poetics, which dissects the building blocks of poetic craftsmanship, and the later rhetorical critics' quest to isolate the techniques employed by poets to elicit specific effects on their audience. But allegory cannot be reduced to a mere imposition of pre-existing philosophical ideologies upon poetry. While some readers undoubtedly possess firm philosophical commitments, such as the Stoic Chrysippus or the Neoplatonist Proclus, others approach these texts without such architectural attachments. Historically, we find that allegorical readers of Homer during the classical period were intrinsically entwined with a spirited discourse on ethics and cosmology among contemporary philosophers and sophists. While the specifics of these early interpretations usually remain elusive, later sources inform us that in the 6th century BCE, Theagenes of Rhegium, and in the 5th century BCE, Anaxagoras and Metrodorus of Lampsacus engaged in allegorical readings of Homer's works. An extant interpretation by Metrodorus illuminates his view that human characters in the Iliad symbolized cosmic entities. Agamemnon represented the ether, Achilles the sun, Helen the earth, Paris the air, and Hector the moon. The gods, on the other hand, embodied various parts of the human body. Demeter becomes the liver, Dionysus the spleen, and Apollo the bile. This interpretation perhaps formed part of a broader understanding of the interconnectedness between the body and the cosmos, a microcosm reflecting the macrocosm. Unfortunately for us, the contextual backdrop necessary for a comprehensive interpretation of Metrodorus is missing. Now, during the Hellenistic period, the desire to uncover philosophical insights within Homer's text was linked with a current of allegorism that permeated Stoic philosophical thinking. Chrysippus, the famous systematizer of Stoic philosophy, frequently employed allegorical readings when reading the works of Homer and Hesiod, skillfully weaving together prior traditions to form a cohesive tapestry. Later Stoics, such as Cornutus in the 1st century CE, continued this tradition by advancing philosophical and theological positions. In Cornutus's compendium, an extensive work that has survived intact, he correlates each deity in the Homeric pantheon with specific aspects of the Stoic cosmos. While he draws evidence from various sources, including religious practice and epithets, Homer remains his most frequent source. According to Cornutus, Zeus represents the omnipresent divine pneuma, or breath, the active divine principle which permeates the Stoic cosmos. Hera signifies air, Rhea embodies the principle of flux, and so on. Cornutus also presents a novel perspective on Homer's role as a poet, contending that the great poet worked within pre-existing mythical material already laden with hidden meanings passed down by ancient observers who possessed extraordinary insight. Thus, Homer and Hesiod are not the ultimate originators of the allegorical meanings conveyed in their verses. In fact, Cornutus asserts that they may sometimes remain unaware of and mishandle the deeper significance embedded within their own poetry. Allegorical commentaries exhibited influences from the flourishing developments in the rhetoric during that era. It is within this context that the term allegoria makes its initial appearance. Emerging as a trope within the realm of rhetoric, it joins the ranks of other tropes scrutinized and systematized by rhetorical critics, including metonymy, hyperbaton, synecdoche, and many more. This new definition, however, proves somewhat restrictive when compared to the broader ideas explored by earlier and later allegorical readers. For them, allegory transcends a mere turn of phrase, encompassing the vast capacity of poetry to convey hidden truths. Within the rhetorical tradition, allegory is not held in high regard and is frequently cautioned against, as it is deemed an overly intricate form of figuration that risks straying too far from the literal and descending into obscurity. Moreover, the rhetorical definition reinstates the poet's dominion over the meanings woven into their poems, discarding Cornutus's notion that the poet may not possess complete mastery over these meanings. Among the Neoplatonists of late antiquity, allegorical readings of Homer ascend to a newfound prominence. These Neoplatonists actually display limited interest in the developments within rhetorical schools and instead return to the pre-Roman understanding of allegory as an intrinsic facet of profound poems, a measure of their depth and interpretability and majesty. Two notable figures from this period are Porphyry, renowned for his commentary on the Cave of the Nymphs, and Proclus, whose commentary on Plato's Republic stands as a monument to allegorical reading. Porphyry, who lived in the 3rd century CE, takes a concise and unassuming description of the cave on Ithaca, where the Phaeacians deposit Odysseus in Book 13 of the Odyssey, and highlights some of its strange features. Nymphs who weave purple cloth on stone looms, for instance. He asserts that these peculiarities provoke questions about their significance and meaning within the poem. He thus embarks on his unraveling of this 17-line depiction, which spans 20 pages, ultimately discovering that the cave symbolizes the entire generative cosmos from which Odysseus will be reborn into his life in Ithaca. Centuries later, the eminent Neoplatonic commentator Proclus crafts the most detailed theory of allegorical reading preserved from antiquity, providing answers to Plato's allegations against the poets in his commentary on Plato's Republic. Somewhat departing from the notion that a poetic image must resemble its intended meaning, Proclus reestablishes allegory on the foundation of the symbolon, the symbol. For Proclus, symbols extend beyond mere resemblances, carrying within them an actual ontological trace of the entities they represent, a concept well rooted in Neoplatonic metaphysics. Paradoxically, this abstruse idea of Proclus's gained widespread acceptance in the Middle Ages. Although allegorical reading is not as systematically applied by modern interpreters, it has not perished entirely. Some contemporary perspectives still view Odysseus allegorically, as an archetype of an every person, and the shield of Achilles as a microcosm of human experience. Symbolic readings, instead of allegoric, tend to dominate the modern discourse. For example, when Patroclus dons Achilles' armor, he is unable to wield the mighty spear, a symbol that signifies his inferiority as a man who cannot sustain the role he aspires to play. Nevertheless, what unites all allegorical readers is a shared conviction that certain poetic works harbor remarkable density, whispering far more than meets the eye, rewarding the ingenuity of those intrepid seekers who embark on the quest for subtle, hidden suggestions. Alright guys, there's so much more to say as always. We're going to leave it here for right now. Thank you so much for watching. There's much more to come in this channel. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe. It would help me out very much. And I'll see you next time. Thank you so much.